Hi guys, I'm Bobsy, and in this video I'm gonna go over a much asked about topic from my Discord, which is server authority. How do you work with server authority in multiplayer? But that's what we're gonna go over. I've just set up two scenes, one shooting scene and one scene with some goals, just to show another case of using scene authority in case you're more interested. But let's start with the shooting example. It is really the most in-depth and it's the one that the most people ask about. So first of all, I've set up this FPS controller. This is really just the player controller, the movement of the player. And then I've set up this player shoot script. The FPS controller, and of course all scripts will be found in the description below, and it's really just basic movement, pretty much as per my first video. I wouldn't recommend using this is just something I wrote in like 2 minutes. Now we also have the player shoot script, which let me just go to the top and let's introduce it from the beginning. So I've set up shooting with both options. We can shoot using the server and server authority, and we can shoot locally with the player. Now first things first, we have a sync bar that's health. This is obviously when the player takes damage. This will just be synchronized to everybody, so everyone will be able to see what the health is. Then I have a bool that we can trigger ourselves manually, whether we want to use server authoritative shooting or not. And of course I've just set up some damage and some particles just to visualize when the hit occurs. Now once again, I do everything pretty simply. I just disable the script if we're not the owner, and let's go down to update, where you can see when we press the left mouse button or mouse 0, we will pretty much here decipher whether we're shooting as server authority or not. Let's start by saying we're not shooting as server authority. This is basically the easiest way to handle shooting in multiplayer. All I do here is I take a shooting position. I've placed that a little bit in front of the player just to avoid shooting ourselves. Then I shoot in the direction of forward. I just raycast. It's basically just a raycast setup. If you're not familiar with these, you should probably get more familiar with Unity before you start working with multiplayer. Now here I just check if the object that we've hit has a player shoot component on it. If it does, and that player shoot component is not our own player shoot component, we know that okay, we've hit another player. So at that point we grab that other player and we say damage player, which is just a server RPC that I've made down here, and all it really does is it takes in damage and it deals the damage to the player's health. That's all this does. Super simple. So this is really all the server side of things that happens here. It's just to synchronize the variable. Then I just of course instantiate the particles and I write down a debug so you can see that we've hit another player. That's all that happens in the local shoot, and this will really be very responsive because everything happens locally. Now let's go back up to where we shoot, and let's say that we've enabled is server authoritative. This means that we use the server shoot command, which sends directly to an RPC. This means that everything from here on out, from calling this command, is done from the server. And the first thing that we need to do is send the camera position and the camera direction, because the server has no understanding of this whatsoever. Because again, remember with this setup, our camera is fully local. So I've sent the camera position, the camera forward, and in here I do a neat little trick that FishNet allows, which is in a server RPC, if you take a network connection, you can call it whatever, and set it to null as the last parameter in your server RPC, you will actually get the sender's connection. So this would basically be the same as writing local connection here. It's the exact same outcome. It's just a nifty setup to make sure you always get whoever's sending it. Now I do the same thing with the shoot position. It's exactly the same thing that is down here, and then I just do a raycast with that. Again, super simple. I do the same check and I deal the damage, but this time I don't have to go through the damage player because we're already in a server RPC, so I can just damage him directly. Now normally I would probably do something like this anyway, but let's just continue like this. And at this point we want to send back confirmation to the player that has shot that he has hit someone, which is what we do down here, because that's when we instantiate the particles as well as throw that debug. So you can see this happens immediately on the local shoot in the raycast, but since we're here on the server, we need to relay this information back to the player that shoots it. That's why we needed the sender up here, as I call him, whoever originally shot. So we do a target RPC, which of course this is how you do that, and this is who you send it to. So we send it back to the sender of the bullet. We send back the ID of who that he has hit, and we send back the point of the hit in order to actually instantiate these particles. So let's go have a look at this now and test it out, just so you guys can see how it works. So let's start by being non-server authoritative. So this means that we're going to shoot locally. This means that it should be very responsive and very fast. So let's go in here. So as you can see, now I have 2 players, and if I go over to this screen here again, actually let me bring this screen over here just so you all can see. There we go. And I can see when I shoot, you can see it will spawn the particles immediately, and it throws the debug over on my other screen that I've now hit him. So we can also go in here and see that he has taken damage. If we now shoot on this screen here, shoot him, I don't know, 6 times, you can see that he now has 40 health as well. So he is also taken damage. So the synchronizing and everything works. And as you can see, the particles are spawning very, very fast. Now something very cool that you can do with FishNet is actually you can simulate latency. So you can see I have this little ping information up here, because right now I'm on a local setup, which means my ping is, well, it's instant. There's no delay. But let's try and up the ping a little bit. Let's try and put it to, let's say 600. That's a very, very high ping. And it will actually go higher because this goes both ways. So 600 is actually extremely high. Try and put this down a little bit. There we go. Now we've set it to 300, which means the ping will go up to about 600 to 700. And now let's try and shoot again. And you can see the bullet happens immediately. And we also get the information about the hit immediately because all of these calculations are done locally. So the latency can really be as high as we want to. It will happen very, very quickly. And the player will take damage no matter what, even if it is delayed. He will just take damage later on, but we'll see the hit immediately. Now you might ask, well, if it's so quick, why wouldn't you want to do that? Well, and that's a good question. The reason for it is because this is not very hacker safe. And generally with a shooter game, there's more to making it cheater proof, but this is really the example that people are asking for. So here, because it's local, that means that, you know, any information about players hit and so on is also called completely locally, which means you could easily just cheat and, you know, send out commands from your own computer that you've hit everybody. Whereas with a server RPC, that means that that logic is on the server, and so the local player can't run it. So you might think, okay, well then a server RPC is better because, well, in that case you at least can't cheat with the shooting. You could still cheat with the movement and your position or whatever, but you can't cheat with this command because this is only ran on the server. So let's go and test that out. So let me go into the FPS player again and set on the is server authoritative. And now let's try and start again. And as you can see, this is still very, very fast. But as you notice, top right corner, that's because we have a ping of 1 again. So let's go back and try and increase that back to whatever I can reach. Okay, I think that was pretty much exactly the same number. And now you notice something happening. I will just tell you when I click because there's no other way to really relay that. So let's say that I click. And you can notice there's a huge delay from when I tell you that I click to when it actually happens. Click, click. Now, this is because when I click my mouse button, I send information to the server that, hey, I want to shoot from this location in this direction. Now, the server needs to take that information, process it, and send it back. That's why the ping up here in the top right corner is actually twice as high as the simulated latency. And this is the issue with server stuff. The more prone you are to giving a bad player experience because of lag. So let's see, in this case, I could even, you know, click, take him, move him, and you can see the hit was registered way off. So I can do that again, and you can see it's registered way off. And this creates for a bad player experience. This is why if you're making something like a co-op game, for example, where cheating doesn't really matter, I would say handle as much locally as you can. Because again, cheating doesn't matter, and that will just create for the best user experience. The more stuff you can handle locally, the more calculations you can do locally, the faster it will be for the players and the better it will feel. Now, does that mean you should disregard server authority? No, not at all. Again, this is right now with a ping of 700, which is quite rare, and a lot of games will actually kick you if you have such a high ping, because it will just mean you generally have too bad a connection to play reliably with multiplayer. So now what's a good way for you to do this? Well, again, it's up to you. When it comes to something like shooting, there's another option, or generally when it comes to multiplayer and you want it to be server authoritative, there is another option, which is client-side prediction. Now, the reason why I don't have a video on this is because it's a very advanced topic. I'm in the midst of learning it right now, and I want to make sure I can do it properly to teach you. But let's move on to the next example, because here for shooting, my very much strict recommendation is if you're doing a shooting game and you're not using prediction, then you just should handle stuff locally and just accept that if people want to cheat, they will cheat. It's extremely hard to stop people from cheating in multiplayer generally, unless you do everything on the server, in which case you're just very, very prone to having lag and host advantages and so on, which can also create for bad gameplay experiences. So it's really a trade-off. It's hard to perfect multiplayer. Now let's go on to the other scene. Here I have 2 goals. One of the goals, which is handled locally, where you can see I have a local goal script here. And if we go in here, you can see that if you are the server, the script will be disabled. I'll just make sure that if you're the host, it won't. And, you know, then there's an on-trigger enter that will just check if a player controller has entered the trigger and checks whether you're the owner of it. And if you are the owner, then it will send a signal to the server saying that, hey, I've entered the goal, and sending out to everybody saying, hey, this player's entered the goal. This is what makes it local. It's basically the fact that this on-trigger enter logic is all running on your own local machine. As shown up here, the server disables the script. Now, if you go into the server goal script instead, which is server authoritative, you can see that if you're not the server, we will disable the script. This means that this on-trigger enter is only checked by the server. What it will then do is it will check if any players enters. If they do, it will run players and player entered goal and sends that out to everybody. And it will also send a unique target RPC, in this case, out to just a single player that has entered the goal, just as a fun little check. So let's go try and test this one. You can see I have my ball here. I'm going to connect on the other one, and he has his ball here. And you can see now just to confirm, the local goal is the blue one and the server goal is the orange one. So if I, with this other player, the blue one here, goes into the red goal, that's the server authoritative one, and you can see we got the message that the player has entered the goal. The same if we do it over here, the player has entered the local goal. So now let me go in and try and add the latency once again, just as a good example of what happens. Now the latency is enabled again. I don't actually have the tick count up here, I forgot to add that, but the latency is there. Now if I enter the server goal, you can see once again, we will get the message rather quickly. Local goal, once again, the message rather quickly. Of course, if we turn the latency way up, let's put it to like 1300, that's crazy high latency. But you can see if I enter now, it still reacts rather quickly. If I enter now, it still reacts rather quickly. And well, this is because these are different cases, and the players in these types of games won't feel it nearly as much because this wasn't as interactive a game. Of course, so this just is to show you that the gameplay experience that you're creating also highly depends on what you should use, because if you're doing like a fast-paced multiplayer game, if you can't do client-side prediction, you should keep everything local in my opinion, because it's important that everything is responsive. Whereas for a game like this one, you can keep it on the server if you want to. I, again, don't really see much the point in such a fun little game, but you get the idea. Just be aware of the client setup or server authoritative setup. I see a lot of people requesting, how do I do server authoritative inventory, how do I do server authoritative shooting, and so on and so forth. I think your focus should really be just finishing your game, and you can worry about these things later on, and just focus on what gives the best gameplay experience. I tend to do as much locally as I can, because I don't make games where I mind if people cheat. Of course, if I was doing a hardcore, fast-paced, first-person shooter game, then absolutely I would go to client-side prediction, because that's really the only way of making hacker-proof and still fast movement, because it uses prediction, but prediction is really difficult, and I'm not going to get into that now. So I hope this at least helped clearing up how you can do these different setups. Of course, just go back, and again, my scripts will, all 3 or 4 of these scripts will just be posted in the description. And you know, I think this player shoot script really sums it up pretty well, where you can easily follow along. I've written little notes for you here as to easily see what goes on, what happens, just short little descriptions. And yeah, that's really it. I hope this was helpful to you, and I just hope that you have a wonderful day.